Whenever I'm overcome with dread, imagining the unendurable torments that await me in hell, I remind myself that I once lived through a summer in 29 Palms, California. Perhaps lived isn't the word I'm looking for. It's probably closer to the truth to say that in 1991, I spent 3 months stranded in the desert where I was left to cook like a date beetle in a bug zapper. There's no need to identify by name the person responsible for my plight. Her name is Brenda Foster. We'd dated in high school. She enjoyed my devil-may-care attitude and self-deprecating humor, and I enjoyed her breasts. Sadly, after the first semester of our senior year, her parents divorced, and she went off to live with her dad in the wasteland beyond Palm Springs. Some 8 years later, at a time when I found myself at loose ends in San Diego, Brenda phoned, saying she missed what we once had together and managed to lure me out to the desert with hopes of rekindling our romance and the promise of a job as a salesman at her father's furniture store. I had to cough up $1,000 of borrowed cash up front for a tiny, dismal studio apartment with lousy air conditioning and pathetic water pressure. But what did I care? I had a job selling furniture, an apartment, and a woman beside me with whom I would spend the rest of my life. That life ended 2 months later. Brenda chose a particularly hot, sticky afternoon in June to inform me that she was leaving to reunite with a man named Warren Reed. Apparently she and Warren had been engaged a year earlier, then broke up and had just reconciled over the phone. As she packed her things in preparation to join her lover in Bermuda Dunes, it dawned on me that I'd simply been used as a device to make this other man jealous. Jesus help him, I thought, as Brenda headed out the door. It was unbearably awkward at work for the next month or so. I was a complete washout as a salesman, and it was painfully obvious that Brenda's father only kept me on as long as he did out of sheer pity. As the summer wore on and the temperatures rose above 100, I sank into a bleak, sweaty, drunken depression that made me envious of the flattened animals I saw baking on the blacktop on my way to and from work. I tried to get some of my deposit money back so I could pull up stakes and escape this miserable inferno, but no dice. Upon hearing my tales of woe, my landlady, a scrawny spinster named Ruby, didn't even bother to take the pell-mell from between her lips when she told me, "Tough titty." By mid-July, I'd quit my job and was staying home all day, drinking gin straight from the bottle and watching Mexican soap operas, shows with which I soon became emotionally involved. "No, Pedro, no!" I would shout tearfully into the sweltering summer afternoon. One morning in early August, a day on which the midday temperature forecast was 122, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, cradling a bottle of Beefeater to my chest as I devised a solution to my problems. It was quite simple. I would finish drinking the contents of the bottle, smash it against the bathroom sink, climb into the tub with a shard of glass, and slice my way out of this ungodly stew. I had taken a large swig and had turned toward the bathroom when I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. It was the sound of a woman crying. I turned around several times, like a slow-motion radar dish trying to locate the source of this oddly enchanting song. I eventually assessed that it was coming through the wall in my closet from the apartment next door. It was more than a mere sob or sigh. It was unhindered, full-throated, womanly weeping. I stepped into the closet and pressed my ear against the wall to hear this bittersweet sonata more clearly. As I listened, I imagined how lovely this woman's voice would sound if it wasn't under such stress, what it might be like if she was simply talking, singing, or laughing. Far from being athletic or even unconventionally attractive, my ability to entertain women through humor has been my sole method of attaining their affections. The idea struck me like a cattle prod to the skull. The bottle fell from my hand into the dingy matted carpet. I hauled out an old typewriter and a box of stationery from under my bed and proceeded to concoct the most ridiculous, inane tale I could imagine. Then carefully hunted and pecked it into place. It was a silly little piece about an old married couple who turn out to be Vikings, but I thought she might get a giggle or two out of it. That's all that mattered. As soon as it was finished, I surreptitiously slid my story under her door then ducked back inside my apartment. I tossed a couple of couch cushions and a sheet into the closet, making myself a bed in there so I could have my ear near the wall to hear her break into sweet laughter upon reading my words. And then it came. The next day was filled with heavenly giggles from next door, as were the weeks that followed. I tapped away at my machine, spinning the oddest, most nonsensical yarns I could dream up, stories involving Captain Ahab, Elvis Presley, Franz Kafka, suicidal planets, hyenas, raccoons, and birthday cakes filled with spiders. I knocked out 3 to 4 stories a day, and one by one slipped them under my muse's door, then ran back to my closet to hear that glorious melodic sound of female mirth I had craved since childhood. I was jarred awake one morning by a terrible din in the next apartment, her apartment. Men were shouting and pounding on the door. A woman was screaming. When I heard the sound of the door being smashed in, I quickly threw on a robe and stepped outside to find a horror show taking place. A dozen or so other tenants stood watching as a young, haggard-faced woman was carried kicking and screaming out of her apartment. Her limp, straw-colored hair flew in all directions as she twisted beneath the grip of 3 police officers, one of whom she managed to bite on the shoulder with her jagged yellow teeth as she was hauled toward the parking lot. By the time they'd strapped the crazed woman to a board and hoisted her into an ambulance, her pathetic screams had turned into a howling gale of hideous laughter. As I stood slack-jawed watching the ambulance disappear around a corner, my landlady nudged my side with one of her bony elbows. "How'd you like to get out of that lease?" "Okay," I said. "Help me clean up that girl's place. I'll give you your deposit back, and you can clear out." Ruby and I stepped over the front door and entered the vacated studio apartment. It looked as if a pack of wild animals had been living in there. "What the hell?" I said, looking around. The floor was littered with empty containers of what appeared to be every imaginable kind of store-bought chemical compound. We quickly opened all the windows so as not to be overcome by the smell of paint thinner, rubber cement, gasoline, and nail polish remover. She was huffing, Ruby told me. "Seen it 1,000 times. Huffing? Do you mean she was inhaling all this stuff?" "Cheap way to get high," she answered with a shrug as she reached down and picked up some stationery that had been curled up into a tube. A sickening feeling stabbed me in the stomach. "Let me see that," I said. Ruby handed the cylinder of paper to me. As I unrolled the edges, I could see it was the latest story I'd written for my mystery neighbor. The ink was smeared, making most of the words illegible, and it reeked of some kind of caustic liquid. The woman had obviously soaked the paper in something and rolled it all up in order to breathe in the fumes, like drawing smoke from a pipe. She's been doing it for months, probably before she moved in. I guess it just lately started getting to her, because it's only been a week or two I've been getting complaints, about the laughing. Can't say I'm surprised. After sucking up all this crap, her brain must be cream of mushroom by now. That's why I called the cops. Folks upstairs and down the hall were always on my back about her and all that crazy laughing she did. Ruby glanced up to discover the bewildered look on my face. "What?" she said. "You didn't hear that?"